The Snowball Effect by Katherine MacLean. Alright, I said, what is sociology good for? Wilton Caswell, Ph.D., was head of my Sociology Department, and right then he was mad enough to chew nails. On the office wall behind him were 3 or 4 framed documents in Latin that were supposed to be signs of great learning, but I didn't care at that moment if he papered the walls with his degrees. I had been appointed dean and president to see to it that the university made money. I had a job to do, and I meant to do it. He bit off each word with great restraint. Sociology is the study of social institutions, Mr. Halloway. I tried to make him understand my position. Look, it's the big money men who are supposed to be contributing to the support of this college. To them, sociology sounds like socialism. Nothing can sound worse than that. And an institution is where they put Aunt Maggie when she began collecting Wheaties in a stamp album. We can't appeal to them that way. Come on now. I smiled condescendingly, knowing it would irritate him. What are you doing that's worth anything? He glared at me, his white hair bristling and his nostrils dilated, like a warhorse about to whinny. I could say one thing for him. These scientists and professors always keep themselves well under control. He had a book in his hand, and I was expecting him to throw it, but he spoke instead. This department's analysis of institutional accretion, by the use of open system mathematics, has been recognized as an outstanding and valuable contribution to— The words were impressive, whatever they meant, but this still didn't sound like anything that would pull in money. I interrupted. Valuable in what way? He sat down at the edge of his desk thoughtfully, apparently recovering from the shock of being asked to produce something solid for his position, and ran his eyes over the titles of the books that lined his office walls. Well, sociology has been valuable to business in initiating worker efficiency and group motivation studies, which they now use in management decisions. And, of course, since the Depression, Washington has been using sociological studies of employment, labor, and standards of living as a basis for its general policies of— I stopped him with both raised hands. Please, Mr. Caswell, that would hardly be a recommendation. Washington, the New Deal, and the present administration are somewhat touchy subjects to the men I have to deal with. They consider its value debatable, if you know what I mean. If they got the idea that sociology professors are giving advice and guidance— No, we have to stick to brass tacks and leave Washington out of this. What specifically has the work of this specific department done that would make it as worthy to receive money as, say, a heart disease research fund? He began to tap the corner of his book absently on the desk, watching me. Fundamental research doesn't show immediate results, Mr. Halloway, but its value is recognized. I smiled and took out my pipe. All right, tell me about it. Maybe I'll recognize its value. Professor Caswell smiled back tightly. He knew his department was at stake. The other departments were popular with donors and pulled in gift money by scholarships and fellowships, and supported their professors and graduate students by research contracts with the government and industry. Caswell had to show a way to make his own department popular. Or else. I couldn't fire him directly, of course, but there are ways of doing it indirectly. He laid down his book and ran a hand over his ruffled hair. Institutions, organizations, that is. His voice became more resonant. Like most professors, when he had to explain something, he instinctively slipped into his platform lecture mannerisms, and began to deliver an essay. Have certain tendencies built into the way they happen to have been organized, which cause them to expand or contract without references to the needs they were founded to serve. He was becoming flushed with the pleasure of explaining his subject. All through the ages it has been a matter of wonder and dismay to men that a simple organization, such as a church to worship in, or a delegation of weapons to a warrior class, merely for defense against an outside enemy, will either grow insensately and extend its control until it is a tyranny over their whole lives, or, like other organizations set up to serve a vital need, will tend to repeatedly dwindle and vanish, and have to be painfully rebuilt. The reasons can be traced to little quirks in the way they were organized, a matter of positive and negative power feedbacks. Such simple questions as, is there a way a holder of authority in this organization can use the power available to him to increase his power, provide the key? But it still could not be handled until the complex questions of interacting motives and long-range accumulations of minor effects could somehow be simplified and formulated. In working on the problem, I found the mathematics of open system, as introduced to biology by Ludwig van Bertalanffy and George Kreiser, could be used as a base that would enable me to develop a specifically social mathematics, expressing the human factors of intermeshing authority and motives in simple formulas. By these formulations, it is possible to determine automatically the amount of growth and period of life of any organization. The UN, to choose an unfortunate example, is a shrinker-type organization. Its monetary support is not in the hands of those who personally benefit by its governmental activities, but instead in the hands of those who would personally lose by any extension or encroachment of its authority on their own. Yet by the use of formula analysis... That's theory, I said. How about proof? My equations are already being used in the study of limited-sized federal corporations. Washington... I held up my palm again. Please, not that nasty word again. I mean, where else has it been put into operation? Just a simple demonstration, something to show that it works, that's all. He looked away from me thoughtfully, picked up the book, and began to tap it on the desk again. It had some unreadable title and his name on it in gold letters. I had the distinct impression again that he was repressing an urge to hit me with it. He spoke quietly. All right, I'll give you a demonstration. Are you willing to wait 6 months? Certainly, if you can show me something at the end of that time. Reminded of time, I glanced at my watch and stood up. Could we discuss this over lunch? He asked. I wouldn't mind hearing more, but I'm having lunch with some executors of a millionaire's will. They have to be convinced that by furtherance of research into human ills, he meant that the money should go to research fellowships for postgraduate biologists at the university, rather than to a medical foundation. I see you have your problems too, Caswell said, conceding me nothing. He extended his hand with a chilly smile. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Holloway. I'm glad we had this talk. I shook hands and left him standing there, sure of his place in the progress of science and the respect of his colleagues, yet seething inside, because I, the president and dean, had boorishly demanded that he produce something tangible. I frankly didn't give a hoot if he blew his lid. My job isn't easy. For a crumb of favorable publicity and respect in the newspapers and an annual ceremony in a silly costume, I spend the rest of the year going hat in hand, asking politely for money at everyone's door, like a well-dressed panhandler, and trying to manage the university on the dribble I get. As far as I was concerned, a department had to support itself, or be cut down to what student tuition pays for, which is a handful of overcrowded courses taught by an assistant lecturer. Caswell had to make it work, or get out. But the more I thought of it, the more I wanted to hear of what he was going to do for a demonstration. At lunch, 3 days later, while we were waiting for our order, he opened a small notebook. Ever hear of feedback effects? Not enough to have it clear. You know the snowball effect, though. Sure, start a snowball rolling downhill and it grows. Well, now. He wrote a short line of symbols on a blank page, and turned the notebook around for me to inspect it. Here's the formula for the snowball effect. It's the basic general growth formula, covers everything. It was a row of little symbols arranged like an algebra equation. One was the concentric spiral going up, like a cross-section of a snowball rolling in snow. That was the growth sign. I hadn't expected to understand the equation, but it was almost as clear as a sentence. I was impressed and slightly intimidated by it. He had already explained enough so that I knew that, if he was right, here was the growth of the Catholic Church and the Roman Empire, the conquests of Alexander, and the spread of the smoking habit, and the change in rigidity of the unwritten law of styles. Is it really as simple as that? I asked. You notice, he said, that when it becomes too heavy for the cohesion strength of snow, it breaks apart. Now, in human terms... The chops and mashed potatoes and peas arrived. Go on, I urged. He was deep in the symbology of human motives, and the equations of human behavior in groups. After running through a few different types of grower and shrinker type organizations, we came back to the snowball, and decided to run the test by making something grow. You add the motives, he said, and the equation will translate them into organization. How about a good selfish reason for the ins to drag others into the group? Some sort of bounty on new members, a cut of their membership fee, I suggested uncertainly, feeling slightly foolish. And maybe a reason why the members would lose if any of them resigned, or some indirect way they could use to force each other to stay in. The first is the chain letter principle, he nodded. I've got that. The other... He put the symbols through some mathematical manipulation so that a special grouping appeared in the middle of the equation.